the beginning. I think when we did maybe Gene and that first, did we do that the first year?
We did.
Shutdown?
I've done 2 with you. I did Gene and my good friend Neil Griffin.
There you're right. That's right. And so
Yeah.
those days were the early days of this thing. And Facebook and Zoom it was always like you're looking at the tech team here.
That's right.
So there was some sweating going on behind the scenes. Now it's like so great. I don't have to worry about that. So now I can just concentrate on you guys.
Awesome. And you get national authors too. You get some big names this way. I see you got some big folks coming.
Yeah, we've well, Warwick's, and this will give me a chance to riff a little bit about Warwick's while we're letting people come into the room here.
Awesome.
We've always had this great reputation of bringing authors physically to San Diego. As my sign says, 1896. We've been in La Jolla since the 30s, and in the building we're at since actually the 50s. So we've always had that great reputation. But in this new world of virtual, we've kind of made a name for ourselves in this world too. So Jesse, having you join us is absolutely amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the book. It was just published yesterday, is that correct?
It was. And Julie, thanks for having me, and thanks for Warwick's for having me. Being a local San Diegan, it's great. And it came out yesterday. I'm not broken. Please feel free to pick it up at Warwick's.
There we go.
Maybe I could swing on by one of these days and sign a bunch of copies for you, so you can
anytime
have copies in stock. Would love that.
Come on in anytime and do that. Then we would love to have you do that, because that's a lot of authors do that for us. So for those of you that are joining us on Facebook right now, I'm going to be chatting with you in the background how to order Jesse's book. If you're not in San Diego, you can still order it from us. And I'll put the link on that in the chat for that. If you're watching this on YouTube later, we're not live with you, but it's going to be a great conversation, so stay with us. In that Facebook comment section as well, go ahead and put your questions in for Jesse. I'm going to, Ruben and Jesse are going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then I will come in and bring any questions that you all might have for him. It's going to be a really good conversation. So I'm going to introduce these two gentlemen and get off the screen and let them start chatting. So Jesse, I'm going to do a long intro on you because there's some good stuff to talk about for you. So bear with me here, please. Awesome. So Jesse Leone is a social impact consultant to foundations, impact investors, nonprofits, and real estate developers on ways to address issues of substance abuse, affordable housing, and educational opportunities for at-risk youth. Since receiving a master's degree from Harvard Kennedy School, Jesse has managed multi-million-dollar philanthropic grant making for various foundations and banking institutions, managed over $1 billion, yes, I said that, yeah, there we go, in public sector investments for affordable housing, and built thousands of units of mixed income housing as a real estate developer for Bank of America. Jesse recently moved back to San Diego to be closer to his mother and to pursue his dream of publishing his book, I'm Not Broken, a memoir, which we were talking, there it is. We were talking in the green room, front page of the arts and culture section of the Union Tribune this weekend. He was at the San Diego Union, the Tribune's Festival of Books. It's getting rave reviews. We are so thrilled that you're here with us today. Joining him is Ruben Navarrette. Ruben is a syndicated columnist with the Washington Post Writers Group and contributor to the Daily Beast, a feature writer for Hispanic Executive, a member of USA Today's Board of Contributors, he's a busy guy, host of the podcast, Ruben in the Center, author of A Dark Shade of Crimson, Odyssey of a Harvard Chicano, founder and CEO of the Navarrette Sonic Podcast Network, and a communications coach specializing in personal brand development. Gentlemen, have a great conversation. See you in about 40 minutes.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, Julie, thank you so much. And thank you to Warwick's for hosting Jesse Leone and allowing me to participate. This is very special. It's the third time I've done this for Warwick's. It's a very special bookstore. I love doing these programs for them. And I'm kind of picky. I only do them for my good friends. Jesse Leone qualifies for that title. Let me tell you a little bit about how I know Jesse. I've known this gentleman for 23 years. We should know that up front. 23 years ago, I met him. I like to say that I met a different version of Jesse that exists today, but also I met a different version of Jesse than the one that's captured in the pages of his book, I'm Not Broken. So we met again 23 years ago. We were students at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He was in an MPP program. I was in a mid-career MPA program. And I saw him from a distance and got to know him. He was a graduate of Berkeley who'd gone out to graduate school at Harvard. And I had no idea that he had lived this, to some degree, terrible and traumatic life, had had a very difficult childhood and adolescence. I knew none of that. 10 years later, we fast forward, he's moved back to San Diego. I find myself in San Diego. He calls me up, we go have coffee. He's talking about sort of the next step in his life. And he says, I have this book in me. I want to write this book. I've always wanted to write a book about my life story. At this point, I think the life story is basically the kid who grows up in San Diego as a Mexican-American in a working class environment, goes to Berkeley and goes to Harvard. That's the story. It's already a good book. I had no idea. I had no idea there was this other story. And then you fast forward again until about, say, three or 4 months ago. He calls me, he emails me, and very casually says, hey, check this out. This is a link to my book. It's coming out from Penguin Random House Vintage in August. And I look at it, and I'm really impressed that he pulled it off. But as I start to read the summary, my mouth drops open because there is this whole traumatic story that I didn't have any clue about. And I think a lot of Jesse's friends didn't know anything about. The people he went to school with at Berkeley, at Harvard had no clue. So ultimately, I knew right away that we had to talk about this, have a series of conversations about it. And I knew one of those conversations had to be for Warwick's. Jesse Leone, thank you for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you, Ruben. And it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be here with you, because one of the things that you don't know that we haven't talked about, and for those in the audience, no, Ruben is not a pre-prepper in terms of sends me a list of questions. So I have no clue what he's going to ask me today. And I'm kind of nervous about it because, it is Ruben Navarrette, right? But you mean a lot to me. And I talk about it in my book, I'm Not Broken. I talk about my experience at Harvard. And I talk about how important the mid-career students were for me in my development and in me being able to fit in at Harvard. It wasn't that it was difficult for me academically. Socially, I had a hard time. And I want to start off with this light note about that, because I remember my first winter break for Christmas and New Year's. I came home and, we're in the barrio. So we're in my brother's Section 8 apartment. And, he's trying to get his life together with his kids. And, it's New Year's Eve, get the kids in the house, gunshots start firing everywhere, the machine guns, pop, 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 and we're getting the kids in the house. And, where my mom and his suegra got in an argument about who was going to cook. So we ended up ordering like buckets of KFC. And I go back to Harvard, and people are talking about their homes in the Catskills, Martha's Vineyard, the Bahamas, right? And so I'm thinking, well, who's Martha? And why are y'all going to this vineyard? Who is this? And then somebody started joking and said, oh, Martha Stewart. So I'm like, oh my God, I want to go to Martha Stewart Vineyard, right? I had no idea. Because I wasn't exposed to any of that.
Right.
But you, the mid-career students, took me under their wing and coached me how to suit up and show up, because you all knew that I was representing a segment of the population that in public policy, very few people engage on the front end in terms of policy decisions.
Right.
Decisions are made of about our community without us being at the table. And you motivated me to be my best self, to suit up and show up, and to have a voice at the table. So I'm forever grateful to you. You are one of those mid-career students that took me under your wing at a time that I really needed it.
I appreciate that. I know I went to school at Harvard with some folks who had read my book as undergrads. I wrote my book at 23, right after I got out of college. And so certainly I can relate to what you said about how the greatest challenge at Harvard wasn't academic. It was social. It was being a fish out of water. It was culture shock. I want to ask you about this part of your story. And I want to break this into 3 parts. In the first part, I want to talk about a series of stories. You know me, I'm a professional storyteller. My podcast, Ruben in the Center, is all about stories. So I want to hear from you 3 different stories. The first thing I want to talk to you about and hear from you about is the Jesse Leone story. Okay, a thumbnail sketch, a minute, literally a summary minute or 2 about your story, about where you grew up, about how you grew up, about how you see the world, and how would you describe yourself to somebody who's never heard your name before, but wants to know the Jesse Leone story. And secondly, I want to ask you about the story of getting published, because when you and I met before the book came out, there's a whole other story people might not even be privy to. I know a lot of folks who tune into these presentations at warwicks.com and who drop by Warwicks later to buy the book, or who order it at warwicks.com. They're interested in publishing books themselves, and they are interested in the process of publishing. How does one publish a memoir? So I want to hear that story, because for folks who don't know, that's a story in and of itself. That's a whole other drama, just in terms of getting this thing off the ground. And then lastly, I want you to tell me the story of the book, as if it's an old friend, to talk about this book. What is this book about? And just, again, sort of just summarizing it, assuming I haven't read it, assuming I have been following you and your writing career now for a while, just tell me what the book's about. So let's start with the first one, the Jesse Leone story. What's the Jesse Leone story?
Jesse Leone is me, and I am a firm believer that every individual should have equal access to opportunity, regardless of zip code that they are raised in or the color of their skin. My life experiences, which you all will read in my memoir, I'm Not Broken, will shine light as to why I believe in that. And my professional career over the last 20 plus, 30 plus years has been around creating opportunities for others. What drives that for me is that I was raised in the barrio here in San Diego, low income Mexican immigrant family. In poverty, we grew up attending programs at Bayside Settlement House, which is now in Linda Vista, but used to be in Little Italy in downtown. Little Italy was not called Little Italy. And grew up in the urban areas of San Diego, downtown, Southeast San Diego, and went to Roosevelt Junior High and San Diego High School. I wasn't that high school student that was going to go directly to college. I had a 1.2, 1.4 GPA in high school. I had to go to community college. So I'm a community college advocate. And I did 4 years in community college before I transferred to UC Berkeley. Part of the story that's highlighted in my book. And so who is Jesse Leone? Where am I from? And how do I function, and how does my brain work? I'm a fierce advocate for opportunity for LGBTQ individuals, people of color, and to make sure that we all have opportunity and access to be successful in this life.
So you had a high school GPA of less than 2.0, but what's very interesting about this is it becomes clear in listening to you, you were always bookish. You loved books. You would go to the library. You would carry a dictionary around. You would go to encyclopedias. You loved to read. Your brother used to call you nerd. This was always your tagline when you were a young kid. As we will discover in this conversation, and as people will discover in your book, something terrible happened to you when you were, 10 years old?
11.
I recall, 11 years old. When your life changed when you were 11 years old, and something terrible, traumatic happened to you, and it kept happening for the next 7 years until you were 18 in various forms. And so those 7 years, would break a lot of people. That's why the title of the book is I'm Not Broken, but 9 out of 10 times people who go through this might have been broken by this experience. We'll get to that. But tell me, when you decide you want to publish a book because you know your story, even though a lot of your friends don't know your story, you decide, well, I'm going to get into this. The first thing you need to do is sort of think about the manuscript, writing it and getting it done. The next thing you have to do is try to find an agent. And I know from listening to you, that was a challenge. Not every agent out there saw the story, believed you could do it, or believed there was a market for this. Tell me a little bit about the process of getting published.
Not giving up, not giving up, not giving up.
Right.
For any writers, for anyone that's on here listening that has a dream of one day telling a story, we all have a story to tell. People have said, oh, you're the unicorn, you're not relatable, Not everyone goes from being homeless, sleeping in a park, to going to Harvard. And if that's what the reader takes from my book, then I'm not doing a successful job in telling my story. My story is about hope. It's about perseverance. It's about moving from surviving to thriving. So whether it's community college, whether it's Berkeley, San Diego State, whether you're going to a technical school, you know, it's about achieving your dream and being the best you that you can be. So my process was not your traditional journey of write a synopsis, shop it around, get an agent, write a book proposal, have that agent shop it around. I had hundreds.
That's how I did it.
And I had hundreds of rejection letters. I even had someone, a fellow Latino.
Hundreds of rejection letters.
Hundreds of rejection letters.
Right.
And I even had one person say, your writing is mediocre at best. And I doubt anyone will ever want to tell your story. It's not relatable. And that, I remember, that takes me back to my days of you being my mentor at the Kennedy School and telling me not to give up. That it's expected of you to give up and throw in the towel. And so, long story short, and it's actually in my acknowledgments how this happened. I had someone make an introduction to a movie production company, and that email led to a 20-minute pitch call for a book to film project. That meeting turned into 2.5 hours. And there were tears exchanged, and it was really heartfelt. And then the question came, where are you with publishing your book? Do you have IP? I'm like, oh man, what's IP? Okay, that's intellectual property. Do you have an agent? And I broke down and I said, no one's willing to represent me. And this Latina woman said, I got you. I'm going to introduce you to somebody named Leopoldo Gut. Leopoldo's an author. And he also has worked on the Jeffrey Epstein series as a producer. He's worked on a number of series that have gone from book to film. And he introduced me to his agent, which Lisa Gallagher at DeFiore became my agent. And within, I'd say, 2 months of working together, literally her coaching me on my book proposal, working with me. I was in a bidding war between 2 publishing houses.
That's amazing, right? I mean, only in America, brother. What a great story. Keep going.
And I chose Penguin Random House because they offered to do my book in English and Spanish. And they agreed to not doing a hardcover. I really wanted to keep my first book as affordable as possible to immigrant families, to people from the community that can't afford to pay $37, $40 for a hardcover book. I wanted to make sure that this was a reality, that I'm not broken, and soon to be in November, No Estoy Roto would be accessible in both English and Spanish.
Let me ask you then now the final story question, and that's the question of the book, the story of the book. As I would explain it to people, this book is about what you do when you're dealt a really rotten hand. When you are preyed upon, abused, victimized, and you don't give up, and you don't see yourself as a victim. That's the paradox. You are a victim. You are being victimized, but you don't give in to that because that gives up too much power to your predator. So this book, I think, is really about reclaiming your life, not giving up, even when so many people have given up on you. You'll find yourself, you're sleeping on a bench in Balboa Park, you're turning tricks with men who come in and drive in cars. You are contemplating suicide. You're feeling like, why me? Why did this happen to me? In one harrowing moment that you detail in the book is really at the end of it all, you just before you sort of get straight and get into recovery, you are beaten. You are assaulted. I find it difficult to even say this, but you are gang raped. And ultimately, a lot of people would break under this. And what makes you, I think, a heroic figure is we don't need coaching on how to do well. You know, when you get the big job with the big salary and live in the big house, that doesn't take any effort to at moments like that to somehow keep your self-esteem high. What is difficult is when you've lost 15 jobs, or you end up homeless, or you end up with some other difficulty, or God forbid you go to the doctor, you get a cancer diagnosis. Those are the moments that really test us. And so I think your book is about resilience, this quality of resilience. You tell me, what do you think your book is about?
And thank you for that that overview. It's still hard sometimes to hear other people tell my story back to me, because it is painful. And one of the things that I learned through trauma-informed care is being really protective of myself before I enter into conversations, even during conversations, where I mentally prepare myself. And thank you for trying to find the right way to be sensitive about that. Yet it's always hard.
Yes.
Because part of trauma-informed care is to not relive those traumas. You say it once in a court hearing or with a social worker, and you try to move on and enter into your journey of healing, which leads me into what my book is about. I'm Not Broken is the journey that I took to win back my life. The journey of healing, which is a journey. It's not like, poof, I'm healed, right? It's not like my friend Gracie or my groups of friends just threw magic glitter on me and it all went away. It's a book of survival. It's a book of moving from surviving, going from being a victim based on the criminal justice term of victim to becoming a thriving survivor, and to move from living in trauma to being triumphant. And that journey of how that took place, and the people that have read my book, people have already read it cover to cover.
Yep.
They've been texting me and hitting me up on Instagram or on Twitter at Jesse Leone Author is my Twitter handle. So please feel free to hit me up. They've been telling me about, they read the book already, and they appreciate when I say that I share my story to remind others that are struggling with identity, with addiction, with suicidal thoughts, that we're not alone. And so my story, my book, I'm Not Broken, is a book of hope. It's a book of strength, and most importantly, a book of resilience, that we too can accomplish anything. I'm very clear in my book, though. It's not about a bootstrap mentality. It's not like, oh, wow, you should be proud. You did this. An entire community rallied around me. You rallied around me when I was at the Kennedy School. Other people rallied around me. When they saw me starting to break, they pulled me up. When I hit that bottom, Ruben, when I found myself brutally raped that night and thrown down a second-story townhome into the street naked.
And you were running down the street to go get help.
Luckily, they threw my clothes behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm beaten up, I'm bloodied, and I'm waving down cars to please stop to help me, and no one stops.
Yeah.
Someone gave me money for a payphone. And the person I called was this one man that I had met 2 to 3 weeks before at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I said, I can't live like this anymore. I don't want to live this life. Why me? I'm 18 years old. I just wanted to be that caring, loving kid, reading National Geographic magazines, coloring in my books. Why did my life take this path? What's wrong with me? Why am I so broken? And that moment of magic in my life, my mom, my moment of magic was that this man picked up the phone, and his words were simple. He said, you don't have to live like this, little Jess. I got you. So I encourage the reader, I encourage those of you that are listening to please get my book, I'm Not Broken, and share my journey with me, my journey of hope, my journey of inspiration.
There was another journey that was going on with you as well. And the most important journey was your journey of survival. But there was another one, that's the journey that so many of my gay friends and family members have gone through of ultimately, knowing when they're gay and then being able to be public about when they're gay. I did an interview recently with an accomplished Harvard Stanford grad who, has done a bunch of stuff. He's a gay male. And I said to him, he knew what I meant by the question. I said, how old were you when you knew you were gay? And then the second part of it is, how old were you when you came out? And every gay man I've ever talked to, or every gay person I've ever talked to has those two answers, right? You had a girlfriend through a lot of your teen years. In fact, you credit your girlfriend, I believe her name was Ariel, for getting you into Narcotics Anonymous and really sort of, trying to motivate you to do that. And I wonder, in terms of how you approach your own sexual orientation, how did you come to that? How did you come to that realization? Because clearly, when I met you, and you were already serving your late 20s at the Kennedy School of Government, you seemed to me to be a together, well-adjusted gay man. Okay. But clearly that's not how you arrived. So tell me a little bit about that part of the story.
That is so hilarious, because I've had people like literally over the last 48 to 72 hours, they're sending me pictures from high school, from prom.
You're all your girlfriends.
Like, oh my God, I had no idea. You were always the class clown, the joker. You were so cute and good looking. I didn't know you were dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
Hilarious. It was a journey. And it wasn't like I just came out once and came out to the world. That context, there's a bunch of individuals in communities of color that really reject the term coming out, and view it more as a process of letting in and letting others into our space, into feeling safe when for a lot of us, our lives depend on it. You know this. I got my first death threat a week ago, right before my book came out, and it's still scary. And so, but for me, it was a journey. Ariel was my best friend in the book. Met her at a football game. Hopefully, she's on here. Hey, and I had a girlfriend who goes by Hope in the book.
Okay, thank you for correcting me.
And she took me to my first meeting. And when I got off of the dope, when I got off of drugs, you start to feel better. You feel everything better. You feel confusion better. You feel rage better. You feel emotions better. You feel happiness better. You feel everything that you've kind of suppressed. And I started getting really confused about my identity. I knew I was gay from a very early age, but I was confused. I didn't know if it was sexual attraction or admiration of wanting to be like some of the older guys in the neighborhood. And so when the trauma occurred, when the situation occurred, which marked my life up until I got clean and sober, let's not get it twisted, Ruben. I was a sexually trafficked minor.
Yes.
Even though in my book, I talk about being a sex worker from 14 to 18, at 14 years old, you're not a sex worker. You are a sexually trafficked minor.
Right.
That is
men are making money. Men are making money by trafficking you. You are being assaulted and subjected to sex with, you say, hundreds of men. And there are people who are profiting from that. And you're right, you are being trafficked. You say in your book, by 16, I was a full-on sex worker in various San Diego neighborhoods. And you talk about what that was like.
So whether or not there's another individual involved in trafficking you, or if you are yourself as a child, for someone manipulates you for sex by offering you a place to sleep on their couch and brings you into their home under the guise of helping you, but in exchange for sex, that's not a healthy environment to be in as a child. You are being sex trafficked, you are being manipulated as a kid, and it happens all the time. And so for me, and I forgot what I was gonna say. Man, you threw me for a loop.
Well, you were talking about the fact that as you say, we're talking about the idea of being sex trafficked and the idea of multiple men. And my perception of what you've said and what I've heard you say to me and to others is that there were various times where this went way beyond abuse. This was people inviting other men to abuse you and presumably also profiting from that. And so you were a victim, you were being trafficked in addition to being assaulted. I want to start the story though, and I did this on purpose because so many of your interviews have started with the traumatic act that changed your life, okay? It would be difficult to imagine your life, how it would have unfolded had you not, at one point where you were 11 years old, walked into a shop, encountered a storekeeper because you were in there on a very hot day to look for water balloons, okay?
Right.
I didn't start with that part of the story because I didn't want to give that part of the story. That's the horrible part of the story. I didn't want to give that all that much oxygen. I wanted to talk about the person you've grown into. But now let's come back to that, okay? And just simply say that when you were 11 years old, your life changed. You would begin a spiral into, as you said, using every kind of drug imaginable. You would end up a sex worker. You would end up sleeping in a park, in Balboa Park on a bench. You would have maybe died. You had various interactions with the law, with cops, being arrested or almost being arrested because you were acting out violently because this happened to you. Take me back to that day when you were 11 years old. What happened?
It's a very painful experience to relive and continue to talk about. I encourage the reader to pick up my memoir, I'm Not Broken, for the details of that story. Part of the healing journey for me, part of the writing process for me in writing this memoir was also a sense of journaling, finding justice, finding peace in telling my story so that others don't relive similar traumas.
Mm.
The reality is that whether or not there was money exchanged after my perpetrators disappeared and I turned to street prostitution at 14 to support my drug habit, which they introduced me to drugs, which became my escape, that I was still an exploited minor for sex. And that's the painful reality that I talk about in my memoir. And part of the journey around identity, sexual identity, and me being comfortable in my own skin came years later because I rejected anything that had to do with the acceptance of me being gay. I was quote unquote straight and I just hooked up with dudes for money. And so, but I was a kid. I was a child.
Right.
Who was exploited to fulfill other men's sexual fantasies. And so the journey of identity, which I talk about in my book, I'm Not Broken, started in the process of recovery. I hated labels. I had a girlfriend, but now I'm not using drugs to numb my feelings. And all these feelings start coming up and I start questioning and I don't know what to do. So I decided to take 2 years off of just no dating. I break up with Hope and I start working on myself, on my spirituality, on finding out what Jesse's patterns are, learning to love Jesse again. And as part of that journey of allowing other people to love me, in my identity confusion, I started to learn how to love myself again. And it all started to come together. And one day I made a decision that I would explore a relationship with another man if that opportunity presented itself. And it did. And that started my first gay relationship. When I met you, I was comfortable in my skin.
Yeah.
And I do identify as a gay Latino male, but I also firmly believe that love sees no gender.
Yeah.
And I do believe that I don't know what the future holds for me.
So let me ask you about, just as we wrap up, I want to get to the questions. But my final question to you is really about the takeaway, about people and what you hope people take away from this book. I know that you're going to get a lot of mail from all over the country, perhaps the world, in the next 6 months. Having gone through this, having seen other friends go through this, you're going to get mail from people who say, I read your book in one sitting. I was crying. Ultimately, I'm glad you did this and wrote this because I've never told anybody this, but I too was a victim of assault. I too thought about taking my own life. I too somehow found the resilience to bounce back. And they're going to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're going to, this complete stranger who is grateful to you for writing your book. What do you hope ultimately people take away from this story? Because people look at you, I look at you, and there's so much about you, Jesse Leone, that's in the winner category. Okay. He went to Berkeley. He went to Harvard. He's a high-priced speaker and consultant. He works for foundations. He has handled over $1 billion in various charitable giving. People go to him, they seek his opinion. He knows some very important people around the country. And they think, this guy, you know, he won. This guy has really got a successful life. He's a published author. And, you know, he just wrote this piece in the Los Angeles Times, other op-eds to come. And given where you started, even if there hadn't been this terrible, you know, sexual assault and everything that had happened and all the drugs and all the recovery and all this other stuff, just given where you came from, that's already plenty to say grace over, as they would say in the South. You have done a lot, you won. But on the other hand, there's all this negative stuff that you had to go through as well. All this trauma, all this stuff that you needed to apply your resilience to. So I'm curious, do you hope that people take away from your book the negative or the positive? Do you hope that they take away, you know, the trauma or the fact that you landed on your feet?
I think everyone will take away from my book is the message that I'm trying to convey, which is about going from surviving to thriving. And that many of us that have experienced trauma can be triumphant. I'm really trying to ingrain that in my head. My goal is to turn my scars into hope for others. People say hope is not measurable. I disagree. I think even a tiny bit of hope that I felt when I wanted to jump off that bridge off of 163 onto the cars below, there was that little bit of hope that said, Jesse, you don't got to do this.
Yeah.
And so my main goal is to inspire hope in others to just not give up. Anything else on top of that is cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah.
And people keep asking me, what's next for you? What comes next? You know, you seem to have done it all. I went to UPenn also, so I want to throw that in there. You know, it was Berkeley, community college, Berkeley, Harvard, and UPenn, 2 Ivy League institutions. We can be smart Latinos that are successful. And part of the reason I also, part of the other thing I would love the readers to get out of is that we all have complexity in our lives. We're complex human beings.
Right.
We all have a story to tell.
Right.
And we are all part of this beautiful diaspora of the American story. And we do belong. And even in the LGBTQ community, we're all a part of this beautiful kaleidoscope in the diaspora. So, yeah.
You know, as a journalist, I'm paid to take the complicated and make it simple. It's what I do every day. I take the complicated and make it simple. But stories like yours remind me that sometimes you need take the complicated and leave it complicated. Don't try to simplify it, because you're right. There is a lot of nuance in your story. It is a complicated, complex story. There is good and bad. There is so much in there. It's an American story. It's a story of survival and resilience. And I would encourage everybody to go out and buy a copy of your book, I'm Not Broken, to buy it at warwicks.com or to go into the store and buy it in person. I want to thank warwicks.com for hosting this discussion. I would love to hear your questions now for those of you in the audience.
Hold on. Before we go there though, Ruben, because
Okay.
I want to make sure that we take some time real quick, because I also want to ask you, and you know, you've been a big supporter in my journey. I turned to you when I wrote this op-ed piece. When my life came apart, I struggled to find therapy. I had a hard time finding the right words for that op-ed. Right. And you coached me and you mentored me as a successful political correspondent. you know, to make this op-ed successful.
Right.
You're a consultant to authors. You're a consultant to others in their journey.
Right.
What do you see next for me? So what would you say, you know, what do you see?
I think this, and anybody who's in the audience who's thinking about writing a book, or perhaps who's written a book, I think every author should have a consigliere, an advisor, a counselor next to them, because your life changes in a big way when the books arrive in a box, or when people call you and say, I just ran across your book in a bookstore. And your life changes. All these opportunities will come to you, and there'll be decisions and challenges and opportunities to speak, and meetings. Should we option your book into a movie, and all sorts of things. And I think it's easy to sometimes take the wrong turn, or not fully leverage that experience the way that it should be. And I think the more people go out and write books, they get better second, third time around. Writing the book is a huge deal, but then once it's done, it's in your hand, then the fun begins. You've got to then market the book, learn to talk about the book.
A lot of work.
You've got to go to people in my business and take a book that's 200 pages long and give me the 5-minute summary, on national television, on live TV. It's not easy. So that's what I enjoy doing for people, showing them how to do that. I appreciate what you said. So my sense of where you're headed, not even your advice, my sense of where you're headed is in the telling of more stories, the expanding of this book into a movie, perhaps. And also you're going to decide whether you want to continue to write. And, I built a career as a writer, been doing this for the last 33 years. It may not be that you become a full-fledged writer, but you have done this incredible thing, and it's going to take you to some great places. So good for you, my friend. I'm so proud of you. I'm glad this happened. Let's welcome back in Julie Slavinsky. Julie, thank you for hosting this here at warwicks.com.
Oh, thank you both. A conversation that is powerful, amazing sitting in the back here listening. We do have a couple of questions. I have a couple of my own, which I always do. So I always kind of sneak mine in as well. So you'll have to bear with me, Jesse. So the first one came in right away from Linda. She said, congratulations. By the way, Jesse and Ruben, go on our Facebook page after this. There's so much love for you and for both of you on the book. So there's some great comments that I won't be able to get to all of them. But Linda had a question with the congratulations. Her question is, why this book now?
So how about that, Jesse? Why this book now? What about the timing? This book is being published in 2022. What's going on in America that makes this book particularly timely?
It's extremely relevant to what's happening in America today, to inspire others to just not give up. We are all a part of this beautiful diaspora of the American dream. And we all should have the right to achieve that American dream. How many more potential Harvard graduates need to die of fentanyl overdoses, for example? How many more need to have their success blocked because of the zip code in which they are raised in due to lack of opportunity? My dream is that my memoir, I'm Not Broken, inspires others, regardless of their life circumstances, that there is hope. And if we're talking about America and where we are today, that there's that space to recognize that we're a beautiful diaspora in this country of achieving that American dream. That, for me, I just relevant today.
Well, for
which
me,
that I think, oh, go ahead.
As an at-risk, well, just quickly, Julie, I was going to say that we talk a lot about, and work with nonprofits who talk about dealing with at-risk youth. And they talk about changing demographics. 39% of the state of California is Hispanic, Latino. And they talk about dealing with at-risk youth. I think of Jesse Leone as an example of someone who was at risk and who came back from the brink. And so I think there's a practical application for what he's talking about.
I agree. And that's where my question was going to lead, because you said that you pulled yourself up and went to a community college, correct? And sometimes that people can't get beyond a community college. It's hard to move even off into a 4-year college. At what point did you yourself, Jesse, say, I'm going here? What's the next step? Because that's a big step to make.
And I do encourage the reader or anyone listening to pick up I'm Not Broken, because I do actually talk about those key decision points in my life where where people were placed strategically in my life at exactly the right moments to encourage me to apply. I did cosmetology for a year because I just thought I would get my cosmetology license and learn that trade, work full-time at a hair salon and stay in San Diego. But I made a commitment to my community college counselor and we shook hands, and shaking hands for us is gold. Your word is gold. And I promised her that I would go seek a bachelor's degree and I would not give up. And I thought I was going to go to San Diego State.
Yeah.
And so people kept coming into my life in these moments of magic and catapulted me into the next chapter.
Because those places are scary. The unknown is very scary. And going from the community college, you get used to that. You go to the 4-year, going to the East Coast, going to Hart, that is, you might as well be on another planet from San Diego into those environments. Honestly, it's, the people that you're surrounded there, and thank goodness that people came into your life that were mentors, and like Ruben. It's admirable, and it's hard. And I think that people need to understand that it's hard, it's hard to leave your community, and it's hard to leave what's safe and make those decisions for something better and for something different.
And it was an added benefit. You didn't necessarily trade San Diego and give up on San Diego and go to Boston and stay in Boston or stay in Philadelphia. And we were at Penn. You came back home again. And so your world didn't shrink, it really expanded. It's very difficult, I think, when you're thinking about leaving home. I know this firsthand. You kind of think, well, maybe I'll never come back. And that's really sad to me. I don't want to leave my hometown. So your worldview is quite large. And I can't imagine you sitting at these discussions at the Kennedy School of Government where they're talking about drug recovery programs and homelessness and sex trafficking. And you're thinking they're saying, as a Kennedy School student, guys, you have no idea. You've learned all this in a book from a policy paper. I actually lived it. So, again, kudos to you.
You gotta be at the table. You gotta be at the decision-making table, formulating policies.
Yes.
Or you're gonna be on the menu.
Yeah.
And I refuse to be on the menu today. And I will fight for my place at that table to make sure that opportunities are being created for others.
Fantastic. Okay, there's some people here, Jesse, that say they want to meet you and Ruben. And I don't know if you want to advertise some things that you're going to be doing in the future, or whether you want to just wait for us at Warwick's to let people know, because I think you've got some things going on in October here in town. So just not sure where your comfort zone is on that.
People can definitely meet me. My Instagram handle, I think it's called, is Jesse_Leone_author. On Twitter, I'm at Jesse Leone Author, and am welcoming folks to add me, to ask questions, share their opinions and thoughts. Please be nice. Please be kind. I am human. I'm new to social media, and I too just want to be liked, especially because I really threw myself out there to try to help out others in my book, I'm Not Broken.
So Marnie has
Julie, we are doing a few, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, we are doing a few other programs. Most of them are virtual programs. We're pleased to go speak to groups, and we've been asked to speak to a couple. I will say this, one of the groups I'm excited that we're speaking to is I speak twice a year at Command College to law enforcement officers. And I am really looking forward to having a live conversation with Jesse and Froome in front of a room full of law enforcement officers from around the state of California, because he lived his life in many cases just sort of around the law. And I think that there are various places in the book where some of his moments of magic were because police officers had, taken an interest and helped steer him toward therapy. So anyway, we look forward to that conversation as well. And that's one of the things we'll be doing in the future.
And they can find it. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I'll be posting online a schedule of events probably within the next 48 hours. There's a few that are coming up. Ruben, I've asked him to do a few with me as part of the Harvard alumni. One he will be doing on a panel, not as a moderator, about ours and another Latina author's journey of becoming authors and writers, and what that was like to inspire others to continue on their dream of writing books.
Excellent. So that'll be so good. So people can go to your website and do that. So
Yeah.
and find you there. So Marnie has a question, and I think you kind of answered this, but I'm going to give you a little time to to expand on it if you like. So I think you did say that writing the book was part of your healing journey. But how did you write your struggles without reliving your trauma?
I still go to therapy. I do EMDR, which is a form of therapy that's used for trauma, in particular started with military veterans for PTSD. The amount of healing, and I give acknowledgments to some amazing therapists. I give them shout outs in my acknowledgments. They're in San Diego, and they have helped me in my journey. And through my writing process, I continue to go to meetings. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I'm engaged. And when something is not right within me, I work on it. I talk about it. I surround myself with love. Family has been a big support. My brother, my sister, my mom, they're there, and they're key supporters for me. It wasn't easy. Hence why certain questions, even in this interview with Ruben, it's being able to pivot and say, you know what, that question actually generates a lot of pain for me. And please honor that. I don't want to relive certain traumas today. Tomorrow may be a different day. Yesterday may have been better, but at this moment, it's hard for me to talk about that. And setting those boundaries is key. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, it was a good question. You have so much love, and Mark, your question did get answered. So I'm talking to Mark out there. Hi, Mark. So,
Hi, Mark.
And there, like I said, there's so much love going on the chat in there that it's fantastic. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up too, Ruben, and you brought up very well in the publishing process, Jesse, the fact that you were able to bring this book, because publishing is a weird thing. I mean, there's no one way. And we had an author last night who I thought said the best thing with all the rejections that you get. People take it personally. They want to change things. He goes, they've rejected it. Move on. Just go send it out again. If somebody's rejected it, don't listen to their comments. Just move on to the next person. I thought, great advice.
Yeah.
But the fact that you've got a publishing house like Penguin Random House to do it in paperback is so huge. And I think that kudos to you for that. And to know what your community and the people that needed this book and need this story in their lives. I applaud you on that.
Thank you. I mean, it's coming out an audiobook. Well, the English version is already out an audiobook.
Right.
And I read the audiobook, which was an amazing experience for me. I would love to do more voiceovers. I'm told I have a pretty voice.
You have a good voice.
Thank you.
Maybe that's the future that Ruben sees for you.
That's right.
But I'm also doing the Spanish audiobook because it's a market that's growing in Latino America. Yep. And so I'm just blessed to have had that opportunity. So thank you for recognizing that. It means a lot.
Should I say now, because we mentioned Julie, his good voice, strong voice, we'll get a chance to hear his voice because he's going to be a guest on my podcast, Ruben in the Center. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a nice, frank conversation, candid discussion on my podcast, and people will be able to find it at Spotify and iTunes and wherever else they get their podcasts.
What's the name of the podcast again?
The podcast is called Ruben in the Center.
Okay.
And he'll be my guest. Jesse will be my guest. We're taping it on the 2nd of September, so in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And again, we look forward to a good conversation. It'll just be audio, so really get a chance to hear his voice with all that potency it carries.
It's really strong. Gentlemen, this was an amazing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed spending time with both of you and look forward to spending time with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Warwicks.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Warwicks. To everyone listening, please go and pick up I'm Not Broken, Jesse Leone at Warwicks. It would mean a lot. Your support definitely means a lot. Julie, if you don't mind, maybe taking some screenshots of some of those positive chats that maybe came through the chat, it would mean a lot for me.
I will do that.
What I'm getting is a lot of my closest friends from all over the US have been sending me screenshots of them holding their book and saying,
Oh,
Jesse,
that's
it got
awesome.
here today. And so what I'm doing for me is I'm creating a small little collage, not a small one. I'm creating a collage I can put on my wall because I am human. I go through those moments. The reason I chose a title, I'm Not Broken, is because I constantly tell myself, hey, you got this. One more day, bro. You got it, Jesse. You're not broken, Papi. You got this. Come on. Suit up, show up, be your best self just for today. One more day.
One more day.
So that would mean a lot to me.
One more day. And there is a lot of love in that chat. So I love it. All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Ciao, everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.